All right, welcome back to another episode of Revealed Apologetics. I'm your host, Elias Ayala, and today, I say this all the time when I have a guest. I have a very special guest, and I like to call them special guests because I don't want them to feel as though I don't think they are special. So they are special. I don't get some generic boneheads on here. We got some good quality thinkers here, and so I want to let people know that that it is great to have our guests when we have them. And today, it is a pleasure for me to introduce folks to Dr. Jonathan Pritchett from Trinity Radio. And what's the seminary that you work at?
Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary.
Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. It kind of comes awkward off the tongue. Now, some who might be listening to this episode might be familiar with you already. And people would probably wonder, what is a good old Calvinist like Eli Ayala having grimy Jonathan Pritchett anti-Calvinist hater? You know? That's not just messing around. Here's the thing. I am completely convinced, and I'm sure that you would agree, that it is quite possible for Calvinists and non-Calvinists to get along and actually benefit from one another. Go figure.
Well, that was my life experience until I discovered social media, to be honest with you.
Yes.
I was a member of a Baptist church that was London Baptist Confession, 1689. The pastor was the son of my pastor for a while, and then he became a pastor and got his own church down the road, went with him, and was a member there for about 7 years. And it was never, he knew that I'd moved away from Calvinism. He didn't. He asked me to preach. I was the outreach coordinator at Remount Baptist Church in North Little Rock. You know, I mean, we grew up in the same church with his dad as our pastor, but this was never a thing about like the contentiousness until I discovered the internet. Right. And then I started reading older literature, and it's pretty contentious in the literature as well. But, you know, it was never a part of my experience in the local church where, of course, it was a Southern Baptist church. And, you know, Southern Baptists, you get all kinds of different views in the same church. So, but yeah, it's never been a thing until I discovered the internet. But I do not consider myself to be anti-Calvinism. I will say that there are Calvinists that I am anti-Calvinist, but I could say that about these certain Arminians out there, or these originalists that they're Southern Baptist folks, Leighton Flowers crowds calling themselves these days. Some of those people are just outright the worst people on the planet. So, and he knows I say that. Well, his forum's gotten cleaned up. I got to give some props to them for trying to clean up that. But you would think that you hear all this stuff about cage stage Calvinism, but if you go to certain forums on the internet where it's just, well, if you're a Calvinist, you're a heretic confined to the flames for all eternity. I'm like, wait a minute. No, there's only like the most extreme Calvinists out there say that about everybody. But why are you saying this? You're as bad as some of those guys. And and I've heard you say in certain contexts, and I think this is important, is that in regards to apologetic methodology, you're not anti-presuppositionalism, but you are anti-presuppositionalist in regards to specific boneheads who are jerks when presenting the methodology. Right. Yes. But I will say there are a lot of good ones. Like, I mean, I love John Frame. How can you not like John Frame? I mean, you have to hate Santa Claus to not like John Frame. You know, I mean, he's just one of the greatest people on the planet, you know. Right. And he has a heart for evangelism, which I appreciate. And, you know, Scott Oliphant's a great guy. And you and J.D. Martin out there, a lot of the younger presuppositionalists are out there doing it in a very cordial way. But there are a few, and I don't need to name names. People could probably imagine who I think they are. That I think do a disservice to presuppositionalism, because while methodologically you and I might disagree that presuppositionalism is necessarily connected to Reformed theology, I don't think that that's necessarily the case, but we can differ on that. But still, as a method in action, when you're talking to people and you use transcendental arguments and you're exposing the borrowed capital for the affirmations that they want to make, that it's dependent actually upon our worldview, and various things like that are very useful. So I know that a lot of non-Calvinists, especially the apologist crowd, they get heartburn and just, seethe about presuppositional. And I was like, don't cut yourself. Well, first off, I tell people, if you've not even read a book by a presuppositionalist, don't say a word about it.
Right.
If you've not even read it, but yeah, I enjoy seeing it in action. A really good debate. I think Jeff Durbin's really good at it. Mm-hmm. And there was a debate that he teamed up with James White against a couple of scientist guys.
Yes.
See, I thought that my debate with Leighton against the Sonny Hernandez and Theodore Zacariades, I thought that was the Zacariades. Yeah, I thought that was the biggest wow debate. Like that really happened. But I think that their debate trumped ours.
Well, the battery acid, you don't usually have people bring battery acid on a platform in an academic setting. That's
yeah, they took the crown, so now we don't have the most entertaining.
It's still up there though.
It's pretty wild, but
yeah. I love the with Theodore's wow with the echoed wow. And it's one of my favorite parts of the opening of the Trinity Radio podcast.
Yeah, that's just gonna live forever as that. That's right. But yeah, that's an interesting debate because I was actually Leighton Flower's second choice for a partner in it.
Who was the first?
And so I got roped in as I've done one debate against Calvinism, and now everyone thinks, and I'm like, well, no, I like Calvin's writings, and I like reading it. I mean, you can see behind me, I've got tons of Reformed theology on my shelf. Anything under the umbrella of orthodoxy is cool with me. Sure. There's so many. There's real heresy to deal with, and then there's a secular culture and an unbelieving culture to deal with, and that's. Right. That's what our focus is mainly on.
That's right. And that's what I appreciate about you. And I think sometimes when you're sitting next to someone like Braxton, you guys have very interesting and dynamic chemistry with one another, where he kind of is the soft, cuddly sort of guy, and you can come off sometimes a little more rough around the edges. But a lot of people don't realize that, and I can say this because I've listened to you guys for a long time. You are quite a reasonable and nice guy. It's just that you do not tolerate man babies, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's the thing. But here's the downside of that. Sometimes if you go too far, you can become the thing that you don't like.
That's right.
And so that's kind of just one of those things that I pray about, that I don't ever cross those lines, because I really am try to be friends with everybody, but I don't stomach nonsense. And sometimes I hear just nonsense, especially from some of these atheists who are attacking the faith. But sometimes I hear it from theological opponents with whom I disagree. And sometimes I hear it from theological allies with whom I do agree. And I'm just like, you can't, that's terrible. Why are you doing that? And so is everybody. It's one of the things that I learned from Braxton, actually. He said, okay, this is not really my manner, but always rise to the vitriol of your opponent, but never go past it. Because sometimes it's called for, you got to smack somebody around. So, but yeah, there's a lot of things that get ended up on the cutting room floor of a Trinity Radio episode that maybe we should release to patrons as, just little primisms or whatever. But yeah, I don't have it out for anybody, but except for I have a very short list, and you can go join our Facebook forum to see who I have it out for. But other than that, and a lot of it has to do with their public behavior. Very little of it has to do with theology.
Right. Yeah. Now, last point, so we don't spend so much time just being nice to one another in terms of like, yay, let's hold hands and be on the same team. I think. Especially my Calvinist audience, who are very, very, very hardcore Reformed theology is the way to go, and I'm that way too. I believe I'm Reformed. However,
you're kidding. Get out of town.
Yeah, surprise. However, building bridges between differing perspectives is not the same thing as compromising on your convictions. I could hold strong to my positions and still build bridges of communication and benefit from learning from people who don't agree with me. We don't want to become an echo chamber just talking about, talking to people that agree with us. It's good to see something from a different perspective and have this kind of iron sharpens iron relationship. So,
well, and that goes beyond just, I think that should in principle extend to worship as well, because I have worshiped in now that doesn't work for every church, but
Sure.
But if you're at a ministry event, for example, or a church that's really more ecumenical as far as like within Orthodoxy or whatever, it's fine. But like at a ministry, like I'm going to Together for the Gospel Conference, and I'm going to sing the songs and listen to the presentations right along with my Reformed brothers and sisters, and it's no big deal, you know.
Yeah,
and hopefully I'll benefit, and maybe if so say, hey, there's that one guy, and they want to come talk to me about it. Well, we could have a conversation if they want to be civil, which most people in person really are.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Well, great points. Well, let's move on to our main topic, and we really wanted to talk about this issue of physical and spiritual health.
Yes.
And for those who listen to my podcast and my YouTube channel, say, well, we want to hear some apologetic stuff. Well, we can make some apologetic application as well, because I think this issue of physical and spiritual health has kind of tentacles that reaches into those other categories. There is something to being physically healthy and spiritually healthy, and how that plays out in the manner in which we live our lives, defend the faith, and whatever. So I think these are kind of holistically related. So hopefully we'll get to there. So let's start actually with physical health. Now, I have, again, as I said before, I've listened to your stuff for a while now, and I'm kind of joking around here. I don't mean to insult you, but back in the day, you used to be fat. I remember there was a video, you had this big, you look almost just like, okay, you're a little heavy set guy, and then all of a sudden I see, as the videos are coming out, he's slimming down. I'm checking to see if my computer settings are correct. Is he using a filter or something like that? And as you were getting skinnier, Braxton was filling in. I don't know if you guys are doing kind of this.
Yeah. Yes, it's happened. I was fat, but he's merely filling in. I get it.
That's right. So on a serious note, though, why don't you tell people a little bit about your weight loss journey and include in there some of the issues of really disciplining yourself to reach that goal? What were some of the things that you did to reach that goal? And maybe you can lay that out for us.
Okay, well, up until last year, it all started probably. You pack on weight and you don't really notice it. See, I sit in this room 10, sometimes 12 hours a day on bad days, sometimes less. But when you're in a room like this, and at a job that's pretty stationary, and you do a lot of reading, it's easy to grab potato chips and stuff your face with it, right? It's obvious looking at me right now that I can't tell people that, oh yeah, I'm big boned or whatever. I just steadily increased weight over the years, and it got to the point where, I'm only 5'8", but I weigh 220 pounds, and I have a small frame, so it's not, it wasn't a matter of anything other than gluttony and sloth. To be honest, being lazy doesn't mean you don't get up and go to work and do a good job at your profession and all of that stuff. There's other ways to be lazy in life, But if you have a job where you're not very active, or even if you do, but you go home and you overeat and you just lay around on the couch, play video games all day, or play games with your kids or whatever, and you don't even set an example for them or whatever your life is like, over the years you just pack on a ton of weight, and And I want to be absolutely clear about this up front. I do not think that it is sinful to be fat or even obese like I was. I don't think it's sinful to be obese. However, I think there are several factors of your lifestyle that led to you becoming obese that are sinful. And it usually comes down to laziness and gluttony. And it's amazing that I started having health problems, and I was actually going to the emergency room and seeing a doctor and had heart issues and everything else because and it was all preventable, But my health started failing, and it wasn't until actually Braxton Hunter's father who called me out on it. He said, Jonathan, you have been here for a few years, and you've gotten fat. It's like the way, like you said, you've gotten fat. You need to do something about this. And, he wasn't trying to be rude.
Sure.
I mean, but he is direct, and he did call me out on it. But what was interesting to me about that, other than the fact that I knew he was right, and I've got a great wife who yes, she loved me the way that I was, but I mean, she prefers this, trust me. But she loved me the way that I was, and I thought you were handsome when you were heavier, blah 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 blah. So she's too nice to call me out on it. But
Right.
so even my own wife wouldn't call me out on it, but he called me out on it, and he's the only Christian I know that ever did. And that got me to thinking, and that was really I think I needed to be called out for it. Is what actually motivated me to start thinking about doing something about my health. And so back in April, I weighed about 220 pounds, April of last year. Okay. And so I decided I'm having some health problems. My best friend's father's calling me fatty now. It's like, okay.
I'm being bullied in the office. What's going on here?
Right. So that's what began it for me, and I decided that, well, to do it, it's hard work to readjust your life. Doing the things that it takes to do to lose weight is not hard, but changing your life to do it is what's hard, right? So it's not hard for me to grab a carrot stick instead of a potato chip and stick it in my mouth. It's the same range of motion. It's not hard for me to get in my car and go to the gym. I get in my car and go to lots of places like McDonald's or whatever. I mean, doing these kinds of things is not hard, but getting yourself to make a lifestyle change, that's the hard thing. But everything else is not as now in the gym when you're lifting heavy weights and you're out of shape. Yeah, it's difficult, but in a different sense. You can still do it. You don't have to kill yourself to do it. It's not like you're trying to train for a competition or anything. Right. But that for me was the hardest thing to do, was to realize that I need to change my life. And so that takes, for Christians, that takes prayer, that takes self-discipline, that takes grace. All of these things need you got to change your thinking about something. Almost, do a 180 from where you're going.
Now, let me stop you right there. So now everything you just said is kind of like when someone says, how do I become a stronger Christian? Well, pray and read the Bible. That's going to help, But then not a lot of people know exactly the mechanics of how that works. So, well, how do I read the Bible? Is there a special way I should read it? How do I pray? How do I develop these patterns and schedule and all? What did that look like for you when you said, I need to change my life, and you began to think about things that led to the actual changing? Why don't you unpack the process itself for us?
So the process for me was I needed to look at my schedule. It starts with my schedule, and then it went from schedule to eating habits. So I thought about my schedule, that I'm waking up with just enough time to shower and go to work. Okay. And then after work, you've had a full day of work, you're tired, but you do whatever you do with your family. Like our family will have dinner together and we'll do a devotional, and then it's kind of free range or whatever. And I found myself, we don't have a TV in our living room, but we do have it in our bedroom. So I found myself, I was binge watching, for me, that's what I did. I just watched TV every night. And I realized that, that's got to change, because if you're just sitting around being sedentary all day at work, and then you're going home and being sedentary, and you're, not doing anything, well, of course you're going to pack on weight. Then you look at your eating habits and you're like, that's where the gluttony comes in. I looked at my eating habits, and I would eat all day long, constantly at my desk, and then I would eat big meals and big portions. And then I would eat stuff that I knew was not good for me. It's like, I just ate a candy bar after I ate, 2,500 calories for dinner worth of 6-7 slices of pizza that's fully loaded. Oh, no wonder I look like, so it's like changing all of those habits. But it started with my schedule, and I realized, I think this is true whether you go to the gym in the mornings or not. If you get up at 5 and go to bed between 9 and 10 o'clock, you get a lot more done in a day than if you get up at 7, get to work at 8, and then stay up until midnight. I don't know why that is, but at least unless you're a second or third shift kind of person. But for first shifters, I don't know how these people get anything done, because I didn't accomplish much. But I accomplished much more in a day getting up earlier and going to bed earlier and I feel more rested. But that was, for me, the start of it, was looking at my schedule and how much time I'm wasting doing nothing. And then moving to checking out my diet and saying that. And then from that, it moved to the math. See, losing weight is all about math. It's all about 3,500 calories equals roughly a pound of weight, right?
Okay.
And there's these calculators that are, they're not overly specific, but they're general, that whatever your sex, male, age, for me, 42, weight, 220, lifestyle, you input that information, and then it spits you out, this is how many calories you burn in a day. Well, if you know you want to lose weight and you set a target goal, for me, I wanted to get down to 155. I ended up getting down to 150, and that's where I'm maintaining. But my goal at the time was 155. So I figured in, okay, I need to eat. So after I did the math and said, okay, I'm going to work out for an hour. I'm going to do 6 to 8 miles of walking a day. You know, how many calories will I burn on that routine in a week? And so I did that. And then every week when I'd lose weight, I would reconfigure that, because the less you weigh, the less calories you were burning doing the same amount of activity. It just works that way.
Okay.
And so I kept inputting that data, and I was able to map out that by the first week of October, starting in April, that I was going to hit my target weight. I beat it by a week, but it was almost to the, but a week is, being earlier rather than later is better. But it was just basically following the math. Do this much exercise in a day, take in only this much calories, and do that. That's why I tell people, you can try whatever diet you want, and they probably all work. For me, the most simple thing was, calories in, exertion out. And I stuck to that. And I have pictures of me from April all the way to the present day where you can just see. And in the first few months, it doesn't look much different. But it's like, Braxton pointed out, and I think it's probably true, he said one day you showed up and you look like you do now. It's like almost, but it wasn't overnight. It just seemed that way to everybody. And 6 months is not a lot of time. When people tell me that, oh, you're inspiring me to go lose weight or whatever, that's great. But I tell people, look, 6 to 8 months from now, however long it may take you to get your goal weight, sometimes it may take people a year or longer. Depending on where you start, how much you can do in the time period to burn the amount of calories you need to burn.
Sure.
But I tell people, let's say in a year from now, you're going to, Lord willing, you continue to live. A year from now, you're going to be a year older. That's an amazing fact that you're going to have to come to grips with. But a year from now, you can either be weighing what you weigh more or weigh less. What do you want to do? Because a year is going to go by, and if you continue to live, it's going to happen one way or the other. You're going to be a year older in a year. What do you want to do? You want to weigh the same? You want to weigh more? You want to weigh less? It's that simple. You just got to figure it out.
Now, when people want to lose weight, they tend to. For me, I'm an extremist. Like I'm not a heavy set guy, but I do got a gut, and I feel like I'm at a counselor. Listen, I have to have a gut, and I'm tired all the time. But you know what? Yeah. I'm gonna lay it all out here. I do have a little bit of a gut. I do feel fatigued a lot. So I'll wake up early in the morning, and I got to do what I got to do. And when I come home from work, I need a nap. And then when I think about, okay, I'm gonna do this. I do like those intense, beach body things, like the insanity and this. And I tend to go off onto the extreme, and I'll do it good for a week, and it's amazing. And I actually feel the difference. And then I kind of fall back. And then I feel like a complete failure because I started at this extreme level and then fell off. Is that the case when people want to lose weight? Do you have to do these drastic, intense things? I mean, what were some of the exercises you started with? Obviously, you changed your eating. What were some of the exercises you started doing and kind of continued throughout the time that led you to your weight loss? Okay, so I started my diet and exercise in April, didn't join a gym until June. Okay. Because I started, I get that. I'm the same. That might just be a personality type. I've tried that before, to go gusto and then crash, and I think that there's some people who can go gusto and get it done too. Sure.
But I think more people are probably like us than not. Right. Because they get into it and they're just like, but you feel good, but then you didn't make a lifestyle change. You got excited. That's about it. It's not a lifestyle change. But what I did was, as I knew that I was going to eventually go to the gym and change my life, but I decided to start by just walking. Okay. So for the month of April, I was just going to walk. And then in May, I got out the old dumbbells that are chipped away and have, spider webs on them and everything else from the garage, and decided to incorporate some dumbbell exercises. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did till May, until the second week of June. And that's when I decided that I'm going to, instead of just doing this at home, I'm going to go to the gym every day. Okay. But my goal was 6 to 8 miles a day. When I first started of walking.
So when you started, okay, I'm gonna walk. I'm changing my life. You tried to walk 6. How was it again?
It was between 6 and 8 miles a day. Now that seems like a lot, but it's not. I didn't just set out and start walking for 6 miles.
Yeah, you didn't do like a Forrest Gump and you just ran.
Right. No, it came out to, I don't know, 16,000, 17,000 steps or whatever.
Okay.
So my iPhone had a little heart app, and I think smartphones have these in general, right? And it's basically a pedometer. And so I would go until it said either 6 or, 7, sometimes a little bit over. And it would start by walking a little bit in the morning, walk at my lunch break, and take a walk with the wife and kids at night, and then you just keep going, even if they quit, until you see that 6 or even past that.
Do you walk fast? Do you walk fast to make a sweat?
No.
You're just doing a casual walk.
Just casual walk with the family, except, I probably walk a little bit faster when I was by myself or in my lunch break in the parking garage or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I just tried to make sure that I did not go to bed until I had that 6 miles at least on my little, little phone app.
Okay.
I don't even have a Fitbit. It's just a little app on my phone that tracks your steps and mileage. And so I started with that. And then I started while I was watching television, hadn't changed that yet. In May, I got out my dumbbell exercises and would do that for about 45 minutes or 42, however long a television show is without commercials on Netflix. You know, I was just like, well, you're going to do hand weights with it, the dumbbell weights with it. You could do all kinds of different dumbbell exercises and that kind of helped a little bit. And that's when I really started getting better at the diet and counting the calories and all of that. And we have a little game at the office that they can now shout out something like an Arby's French au jus dip sandwich, and I'll be like 740 calories because I know exactly how much things are. Because you get in the habit of looking at the foods, and a lot of restaurants will have the calorie thing. And so I started counting the calories, and I limited myself to 1,500 a day. And then one cheat day a week where I do like 500 or something, taking it a little bit more. But I gave myself a cheat day. Sorry, hang on.
That's all right. Yeah, I got the same thing in my office. I got to clap in to get the light back on.
Yeah, well, no, I have a hutch here, and the motion sensor is behind it. So, I record a lot of lectures in my desk, and every lecture has the lights go out on it. I start waving my hands around. I don't know why that is, but yeah, so the counting calories and dieting, I looked at all the different ways to diet, all the different exercise routines, but I found that the basic calorie and exercise, diet and exercise, count your calories. And I still count my calories. Mm-hmm. I'm eating between 2,800 and 3,000 calories a day now, but I still count them, and I still make sure that they're healthy. Healthy.
How many calories should a person have a day? I know it differs, but is there a general amount of calories we should be having a day and trying not to go over?
I'm sure that medical experts will have a different answer than me, but no, because some people are trying to lose weight, which means you need to take in fewer calories than you burn, and you need to figure out, and I know that they're rough guesstimates on these calculators that you find online, but how many calories on average do you burn on a treadmill or burn on lifting weights at a light effort or a vigorous effort? How much? So you plug in all those numbers, and then it'll tell you how many calories you're going to burn if you do that. You say, well, so I got it to where, when I was 220, I was burning 3,700 calories with the amount of exercise and walking and all that I was doing. Mm-hmm. And so I could just take in 1,500 calories and lose a pound every 2 days, So it all depends. But if you're like me right now, I weigh 150 pounds and I burn, because of my daily activity levels higher, I burn 3,000 calories. So I try to make sure I get between 28 and, because I don't want to lose any more weight or I'll start looking like a cancer patient. So, So I'm happy where I'm at, so I want to maintain, so I have to do the things that is required to maintain.
Now, were you ever in a place where, I'm thinking in terms of myself, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, in terms of fatigue, I drink so much coffee. To be honest, I'm not exaggerating. I think I drink more coffee than I drink water.
Oh man, no.
It's terrible. So what role does water play in this entire process, staying hydrated and things like that?
I'm forced myself to drink 6 bottles of water a day minimum.
Okay.
Minimum. And people tell me, well, that they always point to something. Braxton says it's the walking, not the weightlifting. The weightlifting made you get a little bit toned, but the walking is what caused you to lose weight. Dr. Elliott says, no, it's drinking all that water flushes you out. That's why you lost weight. And I'm like, no, I just did all of that, and that's why I lost the weight. You know, but they always find the one thing that they don't want to do. Like, I don't want to drink all that water, so that's what did it for you. But I'm not going to do it.
Right.
You know, I don't want to do all that walking. But no, it's I make sure I drank 6, and everyone knows that this diet citrus drop is my beverage of choice. I talk about it, and I don't get paid to talk about it. But I drink probably a 2-liter a day of diet soda, so I'm not one to pick on you for your coffee.
Right.
Coffee's just dirt water anyway. But I don't drink coffee.
It's like you insulted a family member. Coffee is very important.
No, I know. Trust me. Everyone in this office Braxton drinks cold coffee and ice.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it's fancy that way. All right.
No, it's nasty that way. But yeah, no. So I'm not one to talk about people. I'm not. Whatever you eat, that's fine. Or whatever you drink, if you like coffee, fine. I like my caffeine too. I just not coffee. But I do recommend whatever it is, drink a lot of water.
Okay.
You know, you go to the bathroom more. But you probably if you drink as much coffee as you say.
Yeah.
But
that's right.
But I think everyone said drink a lot of water, so I drink a lot of water. I'm not an expert, you know.
Sure.
But I just do, when I looked at everything I could think of, counting calories and exercise and drinking a lot of water, all that kind of helped me. Now, people whine to me and say, oh, I don't want to do what you did because counting calories that's a hassle. Like taking this and scooping your food onto a plate. Oh, that one more dish. How hard is that? Read the back of the thing and then use measuring cups. It's not hard. See, that's the thing. People think this stuff's hard. It's not hard. It's not some incredible feat that I did. You know,
right.
Nothing.
It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle change. And making the commitment to do that.
Yeah.
Not to lose weight, but to change your life. That's, you know, and that's where, but I tell you, you know, physical health has led to increased spiritual health. It really has.
Yeah.
So I
want to get there.
Yeah.
I have one more question on the physical side.
Okay.
Well, 2 more. So the majority of the exercises that you did, would you say that consisted of just walking a lot, just being active, not necessarily these intense push-ups and weightlifting? I mean, you tried to mix a little bit in there, but was a majority of it just getting out and moving and changing your diet?
When I started.
Okay.
Like I said, I started with the walking, then walking and dumbbells, and then I joined the gym. Okay. And when I joined the gym, I go to the gym 5 days a week. And I do a different muscle group. Monday's leg day, and I don't skip leg day, but it looks like I skip leg day because I have chicken legs. You know, Tuesday, chest, Wednesday, back, Thursday, shoulders, Friday is arms. And so I would do a different, and I put in our Facebook group, I put my workout routine in there. It's 6 exercises per muscle group. And then I would do ab workout after that. And I do that every day. And then I did that, and that usually takes about 45 minutes a day. But then as I got healthier, probably somewhere around September, when I was almost to my goal, I actually, after I did my daily exercise, 45 minutes of muscle group plus abs, I started doing some total body stuff just because I felt better. Sure. You know, and so now I added about another 30 minutes to my morning routine. But my body was able to do more, right. You know? So So now I work out for about an hour and 15 minutes at the gym every morning.
Right.
And because I'll do the same muscle group a day, and then I'll do some total body stuff. I go to Planet Fitness, and I know people call it Planet Fatness and all that, but hey, if you're fat, don't knock it. And they have other little neat things like medicine balls, and they have they call it PF 360. It was basically a jungle gym stuff,
Sure.
And so when I was able to start doing chest dips and chin ups and pull ups, I was like, well, that's pretty neat. I'm not, getting off the couch used to make me tired. Now, I can pull my body. So, yeah.
Do you find yourself do you run at all? Are you
no, I like my knees.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's why walking is probably a good.
42. You're a young guy, aren't you?
I'm 37, but I had a long life of nonstop basketball, so I developed tendinitis in my knees. So
yeah,
I got to be careful.
Yeah, you don't have to run. That's the good news. You don't have to run to lose weight. It just takes more time walking to get the same amount of that you get from. But man, you know what it's like getting older. Once I hit my mid-30s, everything started hurting for no reason. So
right. But okay, so now here's my last question in regards to just the physical aspect, and it's not more. I guess this is more of just a part of a scheduling. As you know, people who want to lose weight are very, very good at making up excuses why they can't do what they know they should do in order to get there. All of a sudden, I become allergic to rain. It's raining outside. I can't go outside. What's going on?
Yeah.
I have a family. I know people who want to lose weight have a family. They have kids.
Yes.
How many kids do you have? How old are they? And how has the challenge of family made it difficult and more challenging to maintain a consistent schedule in all of the things you need to do? Waking up early, going out for your runs, going to the gym. How does that all work in light of the fact that you're a family man?
Yeah. So I have 3 children, but only 2 still at the house, and 17 and 14.
Okay.
Now I can imagine it'd be more difficult for single parents, but for 2-parent home, it was going to bed earlier and getting up earlier to work that gym time in. My wife is still at home for when they get up. They're not going to get up before I get back from the gym, though. Let's be honest. They're teenagers now. But younger kids, they get up a little bit earlier. But so for me, I've got a pretty demanding job. People don't know this, but we're probably the 3rd largest seminary in the world, So I've got a demanding job. I've got family's very important to me. We're still a sit down at the dinner table and eat together family. We don't eat out much. We still do family devotionals, and I'm not saying we're sit there and we're in the Word for an hour every night after. No, 15, 20 minutes. And is that, and then you've got church and you've got activities and everything else. But for me, the basic thing was, you don't need to stay up till midnight watching the next roll around thing on television. Or if you're even like me, you don't need to stay up where your wife's snoring next to you. If your wife, I didn't say my wife snores, I meant sleeping. And you've got your little phone light and you're still reading a book, or you're reading a book on your phone or whatever. You don't need to get that next page in. You don't have, students maybe, but go to bed and get up early, because most people are not up at that hour,
Sure.
And so for me, I can get up, and our kids are old enough where they could stay at home by themselves,
Sure.
14 and 17, but my wife's there, but so sometimes she'll come with me. But she likes to go later in the day, but, so sometimes she'll go with me, but most days not. I'm there by myself, which I don't like. I actually wish that I had like a workout partner. I hear that makes it easier, but I don't have that luxury, because my buddy, who probably needs to avail himself of the gym membership that he has, won't get up and come with me to the gym. But yeah, for me, get up early.
Okay.
Now that's going to look different for 2nd and 3rd shift people.
Sure.
And I've been there. Trust me. I've worked 2nd shift at jobs. I've worked 3rd shift at jobs, and I still say you do everything you need to do, probably better to do it before work, because now I look at work until my lunch break, where I do some exercises just to because I'm so scared of sitting at this desk and eating. I have a mini fridge here, and even though it's now got celery and cucumbers instead of chocolate, still, you just think. So I always try to stay a little bit active during the day too.
Right.
But for those who have active jobs, getting your pedometer up to 15, 20,000 steps by taking a walk after work's going to be no problem for them as well. But I always tell people, I know that you're going to Google and get a ton of different advice. But for me, what worked best was getting that done before work and before the kids got it.
Yeah. What time do you go to sleep?
Between 9 and 10, and I'm up at 5.
No, that's a fair time. And when you're walking and exercising, what are you listening to?
It depends. Sometimes I'll listen to. I'll give the scholarly answer first. Sometimes I listen to my Logos or Kindle books with the voiceover app at high speed. Little trick that we learned from James White, who you interviewed earlier.
Okay.
I heard him talking about that when he does that on his bike rides, and I was like, "Yeah."
You mean the voiceover, like when you
the accessibility?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay.
And you have it read. So I've got the Logos app and a Kindle app on my phone. So that's what I'm supposed to say. But I've got different playlists. So sometimes I like to listen to music. So sometimes it's going to be things like 80s retro music or 80s pop. Sometimes it's going to be.
I got the Rocky soundtrack going. I'm a big Rocky guy.
Right. Yeah, Survivor. Yeah, well, that gets you hyped for the gym, though.
Yeah.
Well, and you're nothing like Stallone's montages, but you
right.
Make you feel a little good. But I like some of that music. I like to listen to hip hop music. I like to listen to big band. I liked all the Rat Pack stuff, but I was a big fan of Harry Connick Jr. So I listen to some of the big band and swing music. So I listen to all kinds of music. I don't have a preference. I have to say that no, I don't listen to contemporary Christian music on my.
All right.
I don't have that.
You don't listen to Oceans when you're bench pressing.
Right. No, but I do. People do make fun of me because I do have in my retro playlist. I do have Cyndi Lauper's "Time After Time," and they were teasing me on the forum saying you're not going to get big muscles listening to
No, that's not going to work.
Lifting through the tears, But no, I like that old Duran Duran, Flock of Seagulls, Tears for Fears stuff, All
right,
stuff that I remembered on Top 40 radio when I was, a youngin'. So,
all right, well, that's awesome. So now that people, I'm gonna mark this timestamp, 42 minutes and 45 seconds. Now we're making the transition into some more of the theological and apologetic transition. So here, my question then is, how does physical health relate to an intellectual healthy life and a spiritual life? If we could apply the intellectual aspect in regards to studying theology, studying apologetics, how does the physical health relate to, those aspects of our lives?
Okay, well, first I have to give an apologetic defense to all of the 1 Timothy 4:8 is the ha-ha joke. Oh, my life verse is physical exercise profiteth little. You always get the King James version, right? And so there's like, I don't need to mess with all that or whatever.
Well, Paul is probably fat. That's why he wrote it.
Right. No, but usually the Baptist preacher quoting that to me is fat.
That's right.
Not too many people were fat in the ancient world, man.
That's true.
But if you look at that verse, the first thing you notice is that the Bible says physical exercise profits.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Don't you want something that the Bible says profits? Secondly, it says next to godliness, which is glorious to the promise of the present life and the life to come. Right? There's a comparison of something that's only pertaining to this life, and then godliness, which pertains to both now and to come. Mm-hmm. And so it's not saying that physical exercise is garbage, which is what some people want to hear. And godliness is all that matters, because that's not what that verse says.
Right.
Paul's also using in that same passage metaphors of being nourished on the word and things like that. He's using all kinds of metaphors. If he had said eating a triple cheeseburger profiteth little, but physical exercise is great, then it's a matter of context. What is he talking about? And he's comparing physical exercise, which he acknowledges is profitable, just says profits little by comparison to godliness.
Right.
But I think that's still interesting. So anyone who tries to use that verse to get out of it, no, the Bible is not poo-pooing physical exercise by any means. In fact, the Bible says it profits, maybe little comparison to godliness, but that's still profit. And you should take what the Bible says is profitable. Now, as far as helping with godliness, you understand that probably a lot of people, it's not going to make sense, but you know this. Research and study is a form of worship if you love the Lord, right? And study and encountering the more brilliant minds of the faith, that have lived through that, and they've walked with God and wrestled with Scripture, and they've had life experiences of being Spirit-filled believers, right? And reading scholarship, reading devotional material put together by people, reading, the spiritual classics, all those kinds of things, more study, reading the Word itself. None of us believe that you should just read the Bible and nothing else. Right. So when you read all of this material as part of your vocation or your ministry or whatever, you're reading more than just the Bible.
Sure.
But you do believe that to want to come to know more about the Lord you serve and want to understand his word better, you've got to read scholars to understand hermeneutics and exegetical methods and things like that. So all of this stuff that we read informs our spiritual life, and that leads us to, it inspires us to engage in spiritual disciplines such as Bible study, right? Mm-hmm. Such as praying, disciplines like memorizing Scripture, and all of these different things that we could. Some people are, weird about the word meditation, but if that word bothers you, reflecting upon, meditating on the Psalms, meditating on the law like David did day and night, just think, filling your thought, because there is a principle of what you put in your mind is what's going to come out of your mouth,
Sure.
And so when you feel better, like I feel better, I don't feel fatigued and sick all the time like I used to. Mm-hmm. Sick to my stomach from overeating, sick from my heart feeling sagging because I'm not being heart healthy, whatever.
Sure.
Winded from doing incredible feats like standing up, But I don't have those issues anymore. I notice that when you feel better about yourself, you're more mentally, you're not focused on your hurts, and aches and your lack of self-confidence and just everything. We think about what we look like more than anyone in any time of history because mirrors are so prevalent. People don't realize that not everyone had a mirror. Sometimes they had bronze that they tried to, have you ever tried to look at bronze to see yourself?
Yeah, it doesn't look good.
Right. We have more mirrors, and a lot of people in the church are probably miserable just from looking at themselves. But that weighs on us. Right. It really does. People think that it's I don't have these kind of clothes, or I don't have the same car. No, it's deeper than that. It's you live with yourself and you have to see yourself reflected everywhere. Right. And a lot of people don't like the way that they look. But when you're not thinking about yourself in negative ways, and you're not thinking about your aches and pains in negative ways, when you're physically healthy, your mind is attentive and more alert to everything that you want it to be alert towards. Mm-hmm. So I'm not fatigued when I'm reading anymore. You know how you can just read, and if you're full bellied and you're laying up on the sofa, he's nod off a little bit and you're not getting as much done. And I've noticed that my acuteness has dramatically increased. Mm-hmm. I have more time now because of the lifestyle change, where you just decide, if it takes me a little bit longer to get through season 8 of whatever show I was watching, so be it. You start to relax about those kind of things. Or if I don't read this 1,600-page reference book, if it takes a little bit of time, that's okay.
Right.
So, I have seen a dramatic improvement in my ability to read, study, comprehend, be sharp. I spend more time in prayer. And that's one thing that I will say about exercise. If you are a believing Christian, and you are out of shape, you will cry out to God more than you ever have when you're in the gym. Yeah. And if you take your faith seriously, which I do, I pray before every workout. I'm not saying I pray before every rep. I'm not trying to be sanctimonious, but I think that the Lord is a part of these kinds of lifestyle changes. And when you do all things to the glory of God, like Paul tells us to in Colossians, you just incorporate all of that more, and you're more aware of it, especially when you go through a life change. Like I went through a life change, and everyone can see it as far as my outward appearance. Mm-hmm. But also, when you've been a longtime viewer of Trinity Radio, I've also gotten nicer as I've lost weight, and Braxton's gotten more snarky as I put it on.
He's just not happy with himself.
Right. Well, like I said, it has a lot to do with you think about yourself more often than you realize.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
And that's part of our sinfulness is that we're not Christ-oriented and we're more self-oriented. But one day we'll be rid of that. But I do see myself feeling better. My prayer is more meaningful because I know that God took me through this, and I know that our atheist friends will say, "Well, I know people who lose weight all the time, and they're not, and I know people who make drastic lifestyle improvements, and they don't believe in this stuff." Yeah, but see, number one, they're just wrong. But number two, when you put God as forefront of your life, everything, you become, spending more time with your wife will bring you closer to your wife. Mm-hmm. Spending more time with anybody will bring you closer to them as a friend. Spending more time with God brings you closer to God. And you find so many ways when you unglue from the lifestyle of being sedentary, of being mindlessly in front of a screen, whether it's on social, and my social media time has been cut in half too. I realize I waste so much time on social media, engaging in conversations that if 4 people are still reading 120 comments deep, then they're as fat as I am. And they need to stop because what we're saying to each other that no one in the world cares about is not that important. Right. And so, that I've gotten away from all of that meaningless social media interaction. I've gotten away from. Your voice is not changing the world. Don't think it is. Stop it. And chances are, if you're that far into it, you're just trying to save face at some point and keep from saying something too ugly. So just stop it.
I think healthy living kind of plays itself out in the same way, and I'm using like a loose example, as fasting does. When you avoid food and rely on the Lord, there is a creation of conflict within yourself in that whole testing of fasting. That causes you to call out to God. And when you're working out and it's difficult, you're almost training yourself. If you're a Christian and you're thinking about this intentionally, you're training yourself by putting yourself in an uncomfortable position to all the more rely on the Lord. So there's almost like a spiritual aspect to the physical aspect that for godly-minded people who want to think biblically and grow in their relationship with God, they make these connections and they use these difficult challenges like getting healthy and things like that as just another opportunity to train yourself to rely on God.
Right. And like I said, a lifestyle change is not just about my diet and exercise. Sure. I grew up in a wonderful Christian home. My dad was probably the godliest man I've ever known. He was a Sunday school teacher. He was an interested layperson. I still have his John MacArthur commentaries and stuff that after he passed, his Wayne Grudem systematic. I mean, the things that interested laypersons would get into, that's not something that I would use on a regular basis, but I keep it because it reminded me of my dad. Sure. They were his books and the great books of the Western World set that he bought and he was interested in reading and all of that. So my dad was, but you know what we never did? We never had consistent Bible studies as a family. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm not knocking him for having not done that. Just wasn't part of our life. And I noticed that my wife and we wanted to have daily devotionals, but we've done it so inconsistently over the years. We get excited. We're going to do it. And we do it for 2 weeks. And then it becomes easy to go, I'm just tired. A long day at work. We'll do it tomorrow, But I will say that we've gotten more consistent and all of those things as a family. of eating together, of doing that nightly devotional, doing the weekly game night, with your kids, doing those types of things. I become more consistent in my own personal devotional studies and devotional times. Yes, no matter if you work at a seminary, you shouldn't just read heady academic stuff. A good daily devotional goes a long way. You need that real world practical stuff,
sure,
especially scholars, because they're obnoxious people. But yeah, I've noticed that just everything that I needed to get in order happened along the way of disciplining myself, disciplining my body like a boxer, like Paul says, all these other things fell into place as far as being consistent and disciplined. And I don't think that I would have that discipline had I not been disciplined about my eating habits and my exercise and activity level. I don't think, because it all is like a perfect storm of everything in my life becoming more ordered and disciplined. And I think it started with the weight loss, but it carries over into the feeling better, being more disciplined, being more consistent on a day-to-day basis of doing the same things. You get more consistent in everything. You get more consistent in your daily Bible readings. You get more consistent in your family life, your family devotional. You get more consistent at showing up at church every Sunday. All these kinds of things become more and more consistent in your life. And I can't say that I'm sure that there are tons of people out there who have weight problems that read their Bible every day and all that stuff. I'm not saying that that's going to, but if you are a person that are not consistent in your studies, in your spiritual disciplines and all of that, getting physically disciplined will help you get spiritually and mentally disciplined. Yeah. And no question, I'm able to retain and be more aware because of my physical health. I'm not constantly reflecting on aches and pains and stuff and fatigue, too tired to read, too tired to keep going, whatever. I'm aware that my mind is a lot sharper too. There's something about fit mind with a fit body. Yeah, and I can say this as a former fatty, as you say.
That's right. Okay, so let's shift over to this whole issue of the life of the mind. And I'm sure as a professor, people would be interested in what your study life looks like. Not necessarily, I mean, you have the benefit, I suppose, that because you're a professor, part of your job is that you're reading, that you're studying, things like that. But what does your personal study look like? Is it a mixture of listening and reading? Do you learn through preparing lessons? You kind of like take what you're going to learn and say, how would I teach this? And you go through that process. What does your process look like in terms of your own personal study and doing it efficiently?
Okay, so I break my study down. We'll start with first. First, we'll just talk about the Bible.
Okay.
And I try to stay consistent with two methods. Broad reading and targeted book. Go through a book and passage by passage. And I do a lot of that because I spend most of my time doing research in the New Testament stuff. I try to do my daily Bible studies in the Old Testament, but whatever you want to get into. So I think that it's good to do both and. So I try to read long sections of Scripture. And I think that you can either do that by audiobook. Remember, most people for most of human history did not own a Bible. Most Christians did not have a Bible in their house. They had to go to public readings of it. So listening to it on your YouVersion Bible app audio version, same thing. You're just joining the brothers and sisters who've gone on before us, and hearing God's word. And I think they got every translation available as audio now. But that's a good way to get saturated in the bigger chunks of the Scripture. I got for Christmas, my wife got me one of those reader's Bibles without the chapters and verses, and that's real nice too. Which they don't read those off when you're listening to it. So I always tell, that's always good when you don't have those. Like when you're listening to an audio Bible, they'll tell you when they introduce a new chapter, but they won't. You're not distracted by verse numbers or subject headings or anything like that.
That would be really annoying, wouldn't it? It'd be like verse 3, verse 4.
Right.
That'd be terrible.
Yeah, but that is I think people can get too lost in the trees and miss the forest, or they can get too caught up in the forest and miss the trees. That's why I do both. So I tell people, I don't set a time. Like if I'm in the office and I have time to read, I'll read from my reader's Bible. But, if I'm in the car commuting, that's when I try to listen to the audio Bible. And that's a great way to get large chunks, follow the arguments, like if you're in a epistle or something, without zeroing in on that proof text that you saw two people on the internet haggling over. Get out of that.
Right.
Now, that's how I try to get broad chunks in, and I try to do that daily. Now, I will be going through a book of the Bible, and so I'll probably be starting Nahum pretty soon.
Okay.
And what I will do is I'll probably listen to it first and try to find and follow along as I listen to find the natural breaks in the passage, whether the subject headers get it right or wrong. And then what I'll do is I'll start studying those sections. I don't study verse by verse, but I do study, a pericope by pericope. And I try to have at least 3 commentaries with me. And I know that people just aren't overflowing with funds for that. But, if you have 3 Blu-ray discs, you can afford 3 commentaries, right?
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a dodgeball.
Right.
That's right.
So the commentaries would be more useful. I try to get commentaries from a variety of traditions. Now, I have Logos software, so I have a gazillion commentaries, but I don't always use them for my daily study. I try to find a patristic source. I try to find a reformed source, and I try to find just a standard evangelical source. And that way, because I always want to read outside of my tradition. And I'm always interested in the early church fathers and see how they engage with Scripture. Because even the Antiochian school, that's not the same thing as grammatical historical hermeneutics like we talk about today. I mean, they were doing something a little bit different with the text too. Sure. It's not just those crazy Alexandrians, because you know what? There were fewer Alexandrian heretics than there were Antiochian heretics. Like Marcion and those guys. A lot of heresies from the Antiochian school, which is the precursor to grammatical historical. So don't knock those crazy Neoplatonists in their Bibles, because you believe in the Trinity and everything else they came up with. So.
Right.
So I always like to look at what they were up to. But I try to take section by section. I try to read several commentaries, and then I'm not sure if you're familiar with the socio-rhetorical method of interpretation. But you start with the inner texture, which is just the text itself and the world that's created by the text that you're encountering. And then the next layer, you go to the intertexture, which is you're looking for texts that are embedded in that text. The obvious case being Old Testament references in the New Testament. But there are also echoes of all kinds of texts, whether written or oral traditions from the ancient world that somehow fit into those texts. So you find any sort of connections of intertextuality. Mm-hmm. And then the third level is you look at the socio-cultural dimensions of the text, and what were the thought categories, what were the structures of the families, what were the structures of the city, what were the politics like, what was the ideological, the socio-cultural setting, not just historical setting, but deeper, not what happened at this time in the world when this text was written, right? But how did they think? How did they engage? What were their social structures like? What was their cultural milieu like? And so you look at those kind of dimensions. And then you look at the ideology, the ideological texture. And that's the texture of what is the author, what is the intended audience, what are their ideologies, what are they trying to communicate through these texts? And then you take that, best you can reconstruct it, and you think about your own ideological views. So I'm a non-reformed, kind of just basic Orthodox Protestant, what does this have to say that's in common with my ideology? What is my political, how does this challenge that if it needs to be challenged? So you explore that ideological texture between the author, audience, and you as the interpreter. And then the next texture would be the sacred texture, which is what most people think of when they read a commentary. What does this say about God? What does this say about God's relationship to creation? What does this say about God's relationship to believers? What does this say about your duties as a believer in Yahweh, as a believer in Christ, if you're in the New Testament? What does this say to me theologically? The sacred texture is just another way of saying your theological reading of the text. What does this have to do with theology, doctrine, things like that?
Yeah.
And then the final texture in the model that we use at Trinity, which I use in my daily study, would be the homiletical texture. Okay, what is the exhortation from this passage? If I had to go, even if you're not a pastor, if I had to go teach or preach this to others. What is the exhortation from this passage? And that's where you kind of cross those what they call the hermeneutical bridge or whatever from text to application today. And so, what's the exhortation of this text to me to go and do, or to teach, or how am I supposed to think, or what am I supposed to believe properly from this text? And so, those 6 layers is how I go through and break each pericope by pericope. And theoretically, I'm not a systematic theologian, but I love systematic theology, and I think that the Bible is internally consistent. It's inerrant, and
Sure.
So it's not going to conflict. So as you go through that, you can find, if you take notes like I do, if you're a note taker and you've weighed in what the commentators have to say, you've taken all that into account, you should have a consistent reading. But you can check your own notes and see how well I think I spun that because of my tradition or whatever. So maybe I need to rethink this passage, or maybe I got this passage wrong, because you want your stuff to harmonize. Like all of our traditions, whether we agree with your Calvinism or not or whatever, I think most all of them are more internally consistent than their opponents will give them credit for. I'll just say that. I know that a lot of your non-Calvinist friends think that, well, the logical conclusion of this is X, and you're not consistent with this passage, and your reading here doesn't match what this verse plainly says. And John 3:16, how can you be a Calvinist? Whatever. But I think most systems are as internally consistent more than other people give them credit for.
Sure.
But it's finding, be that as it may, broad traditions are always nuanced, and Reformed tradition is broad, right? Reformed Baptist is nothing like Presbyterian in very important ways when it comes to sacramental life,
Sure.
So there's nuances everywhere. So what you got to do is you got to accept the fact that, okay, if you're in the Reformed tradition, for example, we still have our own spectrums, and you can find, at least if you work on it through your own studies, you can find inconsistencies in your own thought that maybe somebody else doesn't, has a better take on it. That's why I'm a believer in commentaries, to check yourself against other people who know more than you do.
Sure. Yeah.
But you can find inconsistencies in your own thought, because if you're comparing your notes from one passage to another, you think that the Bible's internally consistent, so why am I not being consistent in the things that I wrote down? Because if you're always thinking systematically while you're doing Bible study and you're making notes, then you're going to fudge your notes. But it's going back and looking at your notes and say, oh, I think I misunderstood this because these aren't matching. Now, if you don't believe in inerrancy and you don't believe in the internal consistency of Scripture, that's not going to matter. But we're all Bible believers here, so even if you're,
I like the pause. I like the pause just to make sure that's what I believe. You believe in inerrancy, right? That's right. I do believe in inerrancy.
Yes, I know you do. But I'm saying, but for Bible-believing Christians who take the Bible seriously,
that's right.
Even if your theology turns out you get to heaven, you find out you're wrong, whatever, okay? But the best thing that this method does of unpacking texts at 6 different layers and taking notes without, and you're never going to get rid of all of your blinders. You're never going to get rid of all of your presuppositions. You're never going to get rid of your theological commitments. But what you can find is that you're not perfect, and what you will find is you will find at least your own inconsistencies. Now, if I said the Bible was teaching this back in chapter 2, how am I coming to this conclusion when that seems at odds with what I thought this said? So it's not checking. I don't do this to check myself against Calvinism or Arminianism or whatever. I do this to check, am I internally consistent? And that's how you grow. And it's when you find out that, you need to go get some more help. When you find your own inadequacies. And so that's when I get into the deep pericope by pericope. And really that takes probably me 30 minutes a day.
Okay.
To do my own Bible study.
That's a good way to kind of come at the text to get really the most out of the text as possible. You kind of go through those layers. And I think that's a good way of going about it. Now, my last question is, we want to make this somewhat manageable for people because we don't want to get it too long. By the way, I'm enjoying this conversation very much. I think it's very helpful for myself, as well as I'm sure listeners will find it helpful as well. But you mentioned taking notes. How do you take notes? Is there a special way you do it? Is there a way that you do it that you might think, would be helpful for someone who might not know how to take notes? I mean, how does that process work for you?
I'm spoiled. I work at a desk, and so I can do mine here at work, maybe on my lunch break or wherever I can get it in. So I take notes on the computer on Microsoft Word. I can't read my own handwriting though. It's that bad. So I don't. But my note taking is sometimes I do it on. I'll take my notes and make PowerPoints out of them. So maybe I should just do it as PowerPoint, but. I'm a note taker, so I'll come up with a pass. Now I learned this this method of note taking from Clay Jones, he was one of my professors at Biola. Because what he would do is he would go to like Bible Gateway or whatever, and he'd pick his translation. And they have a bunch of translations, but they have a little gear where you can unclick like headings and footnotes and verse numbers and all that. If you click and he would unclick everything to where you just had the text, then he'd copy and text the stuff to a Word document, and then he would make his notes under that text. Now I don't put the text on my Word document. I did when I first learned his thing, but now that I do my own exegetical method, the socio-cultural approach, I'll do the subject headers of the 6 different textures of the text, and I'll make my notes in each one of them. So I do all of that on Microsoft Word documents. And then, like I tell my students, so I have students, and so say in a class, I'm teaching a class on the general epistles, and I'm going through like the opening of Jude, or I'm going through James. I'll tell people, for those who are in ministry and seminary, you don't know you're taking a class on the general epistles, so this should be your sermon series, Book of James. Go for it, and that way you can turn your seminary work into sermon prep as well and get 2 for 1. So
yeah. So
that's just wanted to
I think that's very helpful what you just said, because I remember someone was interviewing Dr. William Lane Craig, and they were asking, hey, how do you kind of churn out all these different books? Seems like you're always writing and publishing something. And he mentioned just that. It's kind of you double dip, Yeah. He takes his scholarly work, and then he from working within that framework, he'll pull out something and turn it into a popular level book. There's no need, and I think this is helpful for people. There's no need to reinvent the wheel every time. Right. Just building off what you've already done, or even using someone else's outline as kind of a framework to kind of go off on your own and draw from that. I think that's very, very helpful.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that your favorite scholar, like one of my favorite biblical scholars, is Craig Keener. Okay. And people say, well, it seems like him and Ben Witherington and N.T. Wright come out with a book every week, Right. And if you look at in the Reformed tradition, Vern Poythress and John Frame have tons of co-authored books. Like, how do they do that? Right. And I'm like, well, number one, they spent a whole lot of time in their younger years studying. And number two, they're older now, and they are paying dividends of all that knowledge that they built up. I can remember 25 years ago, these guys had very few books. But as they've gotten older and as they've digested so much information, now their output of books is a lot more than it was 25 years ago. So it's okay. You don't have to be 32 and have 7 scholarly books out there for all you seminarians and budding scholars. It's okay to allow God to let you live as long as you live and to take your time with things. That's right. You're not competing with those. Trust me, you're not John Frame. You're not gonna be John Frame. So quit trying to be John Frame. Maybe
stop setting your standards so high. Come on.
Right. Now, if you're 63 and you haven't written your book yet, then get on the ball. But that's
right. There was another interview that a while back that N.T. Wright, someone was interviewing N.T. Wright, and someone asked him that very question. How do you put out so many books? He goes, well, I've done so much reading in my younger years, I figured by now I might just write a good bit of it down. That's basically how it goes,
Well, that's how they all do it.
We don't see what happens behind the closed doors. We just see, hey, there's a guy, he's got an article, now he's published a book, and it's really awesome. We don't see all of the years and sweat and blood and tears that goes into really gathering your thoughts, the information, really processing, and then just kind of spitting it out in a way that's helpful for other people. We don't see those behind the scenes sort of things.
Right. And that's one of the things that as far as apologetics goes, three things that I think for apologetics as far as apologetic fitness, and in addition to your own personal study habits and stuff, apologists need to study the Bible. They don't need to study every single popular apologist book that comes out.
Right.
I mean, because you talk about William Lane Craig's Reasonable Faith, how many different apologists have their Reasonable Faith signature book that has the same evidential arguments that his does? You know,
Right.
And I see these guys who are interested in apologetics. They will go from one apologetic book to the next, to the next, to the next, that are all covering basically the same information.
Right.
Get out of that. I don't care what kind of apologist you are, precept, whatever. Don't just read apologetics books. That's a train wreck.
Right.
Because now you eventually just become a parrot.
Yes, you know? I think that's very relevant to a lot of presuppositionalists that I know. Is that a lot of presuppositionalists like to talk about the worldview stuff because they usually have access. They usually gain access to their point of contact is, say, someone like Bonson or a debate or something, and they'll talk a lot about this worldview stuff, but they've never actually studied the specific evidences and specific intricacies when you actually dip your head into the details of that worldview. And so that's why you have a lot of presuppositionalists who not only do they not want to talk about the evidence because of the framework that sometimes they're operating in, they lack the capacity to do so.
And they never read Kant.
That's right. So there needs to be a balance of that broader kind of study and that more specific, you know, knowing what the overall story of Scripture is, but knowing how to respond to someone who brings an objection to your faith out of the Levitical law or something like that.
Yeah.
You need to be able to have that in the details, in the weeds perspective, as well as that broader kind of big picture
More
perspective.
people are going to ask any apologist of any kind of method about the Canaanite genocide, so-called, and slavery in the Bible than they are going to argue over objective foundations for morality, or, you know, the person on the street that's a non-believer, maybe somewhat antagonistic. You're going to get questions like as basic as, why is it just for someone else to be punished for my sins?
That's right.
I mean, we're talking about substitutionary atonement. That's basic theology, but apologists not very biblically literate, you know. Braxton even made a video where he said that one of his biggest convictions was that he'd been doing it all wrong because he just read apologetics and didn't really study doctrine and Scripture much in his early days. And that happens to a lot of people that get into apologetics because they want to debate, and which is the worst reason to get into apologetics. You get into apologetics to evangelize, but you know, people want to debate and they want to, you know, all this stuff. And so you see people kind of like what you were talking about, like the getting down in the nitty gritty. You see a lot of people in classical apologetics. They'll say, well, the Guth-Wellington model in physics blows out the idea of a infinite, you know, regression of time.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever read their paper? No, you heard William Lane Craig say that.
Yes.
You know, and Frank Kirk and all the other guys who repeated William Lane Craig's line.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
You
now, if you've read the paper, like, that's all the more power to you. But the average popularizer, they don't go into those details, and we become, as you said before, we become parrots.
Yeah, you know? I want to say, if you've read the paper, you're talking about less than 20 people in the entire YouTube apologetics world that has read
Or if you understood the paper, that's a different thing.
I don't understand that paper. And apparently they've moved on from it anyway. So, you know, I'm just saying, I don't understand physics. I don't pretend to. So I'm not saying stuff like that personally. But most people don't care. People think that atheism is the big thing in apologetics. Like, that's less than 4% of, if you're interested in evangelism, what I call just a chaotic paganism or spirituality. That's most lost people.
Mm-hmm.
They're not atheists.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that apologists, you know, if you want to be a fit apologist and you read evangelism books and go learn how to do that, then do it, and realize that arguments against atheism, you're going to be lucky if one in 100 people you witness to is going to be an atheist.
Yeah.
You know, nominal Christians and I'm spiritual, not religious people is who you're going to talk to.
And that's a whole different animal. That's sometimes more difficult to talk to someone like that than talking to an atheist.
Yes, because it's irrational. You want to talk about no foundations or consistencies or and they don't care.
There is when you just said because it's irrational. That's very funny because I spoke with someone who knew Dr. Gordon Clark. Yeah. Now, if those of you who know who Gordon Clark is, he's a specific brand of presuppositionalism, but many people know him as a brilliant logician. I mean, this guy was an iron trap mind in a lot of regards, and he used to invite his students over his house to play chess. And of course, playing chess against Dr. Clark was you're going to get crushed because he's just such a logician. And so one of the students lasted the longest with Dr. Clark. And he was surprised. Dr. Clark was surprised. And everyone asked the guy, eventually lost, but everyone asked him, how did you last so long against Dr. Clark? And he goes, well, I was just making random irrational moves. And when I would make a move, Dr. Clark would think, why would you make that move? And there was no reason. It was the irrationality of it all that threw off his rational mind. And I think the same thing when we're speaking with nominal Christians, the irrationality of it makes it very difficult to reason with those sorts of people. And so that's a whole nother apologetical task that I think is underdeveloped in a lot of the books out there and the way we do apologetics.
Yes. So when you ask someone who doesn't believe in a monotheist God why there are souls and spells work, and you tell them, but don't you see your worldview can't account for that? There's no foundation of a omnipotent being that can bring those kinds of things. I don't care.
Yeah.
This is what I believe. This is just my belief. You have your belief. How does your apologetics stand to that? What do you say at that? So, No,
this is that's actually that's probably worthy of a different podcast episode. How to talk to people like that. That would be a very interesting.
And that's
interesting discussion.
We'll see. The reason why people don't know how to respond to that is because they don't do evangelism.
That's right. That's right. Because that's the average person that's the average person you'll talk to, and if you're not encountering them, you're probably not sharing your faith on a normal basis.
Right. And for me, we discussed at the opening, I use presuppositional methodology when it's useful. Mm-hmm. You have given evidences when it's useful. Mm-hmm. I've seen you give evidences for the resurrection and for the beginning of the universe and all of that. Mm-hmm. Good apologists will use the best that they can use out of all of these methodologies, right? And so that's why I don't get apologists who debate methods. I'm like, is it effective? Because Braxton makes this argument that I think is right. So even if you're a Calvinist and you think that now Calvinists will have their own debates whether presuppositional or classical is the proper Reformed method, right? I've seen those debates. Presbyterians and Baptists argue about that.
Sure.
Okay, but even if you're Reformed, if you believe that God uses means as well as the ends, and that God can use means to convert the sinner, regeneration preceding faith in that tradition. Evidences can be the means that God uses. So you don't have to be against evidences.
Sure.
So more is better, in my opinion, when it comes to apologetics methods. When it comes to evangelistic methods, more is better. There's no one size fits all for anybody. But I think apologists need to become the evangelists of the 21st century. Number one, because no one else is doing it, so we have to give an apologetic to the church about why they should do evangelism, because just the pastor who says we need more evangelism, but even he himself isn't doing it. It's one thing to say we need more evangelism, start doing evangelism, and do it, number one, by setting the example by actually doing it. That's the apologetic task. Right. And when you do that, you're going to figure out really quickly that different especially in personal evangelism, different conversations with different lost people are going to require a wider set of tools. And so apologetic fitness, it's one thing to have, I have internal critiques of various methods. Some things are good about cumulative decay, some not. Some things are good about precept, some not. Some are good about classical, some not, or whatever. But there's good in all of it. And you're going to talk to someone where you're going to wish that you had a bigger toolkit. Mm-hmm. And so if I can encourage apologists, have a bigger toolkit. Don't be so method-minded that you're evangelistically weak.
See, now as a presuppositionalist, and we don't have to get into our disagreements here, but I think the presuppositional method is a big enough toolkit. What I disagree with is the way that people limit the toolkit. They think the toolkit is not allowed to use certain tools, and so they'll only use one tool in the toolbox. And so in that sense, I think I had a great discussion with Chris Bolt, who is a presuppositionalist in the previous episode on my podcast. And he was talking about the presuppositional use of natural theology, the presuppositional use of a cosmological argument.
Scott Oliphant's the same way. Says I'm an evidentialist in one respect.
Yeah.
But make that famous, because I don't think a lot of presuppositionalists know that.
That's true. That's what I'm saying. I think we limit ourselves when we're just relegating ourselves to one way of arguing. You could be presuppositionalist and argue in different ways. Greg Bonson did this in his debate with Gordon Stein. What did he focus on? He focused on the issue of logic as an aspect of human experience that can only be held up by the Christian worldview. In his debate with Edward Tabash, he shifted the focus onto the issue of induction. Those were two different emphases within a presuppositional framework.
Sure.
I think a lot of popularizers just have one argument. They have only their certain catchphrases that they learn, and that's it. And if you veer from that, you're letting man be the judge and all this garbage of
I like to say Braxton always says, why don't you just call yourself a presuppositionalist, because he says that's ultimately what I am. I said, well, number one, the Reform guys will throw a fit if I do.
They probably will.
But number two is, it's because I think there's a lot more crossover than people give credit for. That's why they need to read. And people, if they want to have those, people can debate whatever they want to debate, as long as it's friendly. But I think for the evangelistic task, you should never limit your toolkit, like you said, no matter what your primary method is. And as for discipleship, which I think apologetics plays a role in discipleship, even if you're an adamant presupper who does not like evidence or reformed epistemology, you go that route where, they have warrant without evidence, Okay, whatever. Did you know, again, back to the means thing, did you know that in discipleship, those who are in the church, those evidences go a long way to help anchor their faith?
Sure.
So the kalam and the arguments, the defense of the resurrection and all that stuff, church folks like that kind of thing because it makes them more confident in the reasonableness of Christianity.
Sure.
So you still need to know it for discipleship purposes. All of it's useful in some way. Right. So I think one way to be apologetically fit is to be, number one, well-read, be well-read and grounded in Scripture, and well-read in the best of all the traditions. So even if you're going to debate it, you at least know what you're talking about.
That's right. Yep. There's I'm just going to close with this comment here. There's a really cool little book called, and maybe my Calvinist friends would appreciate this. There's a book out there, a small book called Killing Calvinism. And it's written by a Calvinist. And one of the chapters talks about how many Calvinists, especially like the cage stager sorts, can only find themselves reading Reformed literature. And they actually kill the strength of their own position when they do not avail themselves of the strength of other positions. And I think that's very, very important in not closing ourselves in within our tradition and not actually seeing the value in other things. Presuppositionalists sometimes are guilty of doing this. Calvinists are guilty of doing this. I'm sorry, there are traditionalists who do this where they kind of keep themselves. We need to get out of that. We need to get out of that mindset. You can read people that you disagree with and still learn. And it's not the same as compromising.
That's the key. That's the key. Before you finish your thought, I want to add this and still learn. It is the mark of a clown who reads first to criticize, if they bother to read outside of their tradition at all. It's to tear it apart.
Say that again. Can you say that more clearly? Because what you said is very important.
I said it is the mark of a clown, somebody that you should not take seriously, if if they bother to read out of their side of their tradition at all. Don't care what tradition. Traditionalists who never read a Calvinist, whatever. I don't care who. If they only bother to read outside of their tradition just to criticize,
that's right.
They're a clown. You need to read to learn first. And I read to learn atheists first, so that, because like you said, even if you're in the debate, you want to steel man, not straw man. You want to take them on at their strongest. But beyond that, you gain information of psychology. Why did they come to that conclusion?
Sure.
And you could test your own blind spots as well. That's why I go back to the Bible study. Why do I pick something from the Reformed tradition? Because I know I'm not that, and I need to check against what they're saying. And, oh, by the way, they say a ton of things that I think are better said in that book than in my own guy's book.
Sure.
In my own guy's commentary. Because, I mean, it's not like everything's just opposites. So there's wisdom and knowledge to be gained outside of your tradition. But I think the best thing to do is read widely, read outside of your own tradition, and first to read to learn. Yes, you can engage it and engage in critical readings of the text and stuff, but that should not be your focus when you're reading. You should be reading to learn, and then once you understand, critically engage it at that level. But if you're just reading something to rip apart, you're wasting your time, because
that's right.
You go against the guy who wrote that book and he'll tear you to pieces because you did not closely read his book. You just wanted to argue with it.
That's right. Or you could pull a Dan Barker and say, don't quote my book. Have you ever seen
Yeah.
Well, listen, Dr. Pritchett, this has been an excellent discussion. And I think a lot of people are going to find this helpful on a whole host of levels, since we covered so many different things. I want to personally thank you. This is our first time actually meeting face to face, and it has been a true pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, and I love what you're doing, man. Carry that torch for Precept. Keep talking theology. I love it that you're interested in theology. You're interested in the ideas and the conversation more than you are tearing somebody down. And there are a lot of people, and especially the soteriology debate, that need to learn from your example on every side, man. So I appreciate what you're doing there, and I appreciate your heart for witnessing and evangelism and doing it all for the glory of God, man. That's why I'm a fan, been a fan, like to tease you, but I'm a fan.
It's all good. Well, just stay on with me. I'm just going to stop the recording here, and then we'll formally say our goodbyes, okay?
All right.
All right, that's all for this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, you could email me at revealedapologetics@gmail.com. If there is a topic that you want me to cover, you can let me know via email or on Facebook.